Saptagiri Institute of Medical Sciences and Research Center, Bangalore.
Hence, there is need for a function and accurate diagnosis because we must avoid any false positive or false negative diagnosis. It has to be with utmost ethical and legal regulations. What is unknown is the concept of brain death, brainstem death, and relevance to organ donation and its legal implications are new to most of the general population, so also the many medical professionals. Hence, there is need to create awareness both among public and medical professionals about brain death, organ donation, and legal aspects. So, WHO defines brain death as irreversible cessation of cerebral, hemispheric, and brainstem functions characterized by absence of electrical activity, absence of blood flow, and absence of brainstem reflexes. Some of the most important causes of brain death are severe traumatic brain injury following road traffic accidents or fall from a height, followed by subarachnoid hemorrhage. It could be aneurysmal or spontaneous hemorrhages, intracerebral hemorrhage in the form of hypertensive bleeds, and hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy. Coming to pathophysiology of brain death, whenever there is injury to the brain, the edema and mass effect increases the intracranial pressure. When intracranial pressure exceeds the mean arterial pressure, cerebral perfusion pressure and cerebral blood flow decreases, that in turn causes the neuronal death, and again that neuronal death aggravates the edema and intracranial pressure. A vicious circle is set in until a point where the intracranial pressure comes to a point where transtentorial herniation of the brain occurs, including the herniation or coning of the brainstem, leading to crushing and permanent damage to the vital structures present in the brainstem. Coming to the diagnosis of brain death proper, first and foremost, we need to establish an identifiable cause for the presence of coma based on the history, examination, and neuroimaging. So, in history, usually we have the history of severe head injury or intracranial hemorrhages, and in examination, we must establish the presence of coma, that is, absence of response to painful stimulation, and GCS is a better tool for assessment of coma. And in neuroimaging, CT and MRI provides a fair idea about degree of parenchymal damage. The next step is, once we establish the presence of coma, we need to know whether it is reversible coma or irreversible coma. Some of the important causes of reversible coma: hypothermia with less than 32 degrees temperature, hypoglycemia or hyperosmolar coma, hyponatremia, hypophosphatemia, and any other electrolyte and acid-based disturbances, hypothyroid coma, and some of the CNS depressant drugs like opioids, benzodiazepines, and barbiturates, and muscle relaxants, which are most commonly used in ICU settings. The diagnosis of brain death has got two components. One is brainstem death done purely by clinical examination, and cerebral hemispheric death by demonstrating the absence of cerebral blood flow and absence of electrical activity in brain. Coming to brainstem reflexes, the first is the pupillary light reflex, which tests cranial nerve 2 and 3 present in midbrain. Here a flash of sharp light is shown across the eyes and look for the pupillary response. If there is constriction, the reflex is present. If the pupils are dilated or mid-dilated and fixed, the reflex is said to be absent. Oculovestibular reflex or Ford-Gallery test. First we have to exclude the presence of any obstruction in the external auditory canal. Raise the head end of the bed to 30 degrees and irrigate the external auditory canal with 50 ml of cold saline and look for nystagmus, which is absent in brainstem dead patients. It tests cranial nerve 8, which is afferent, 3 and 6, which are efferent. Oculocephalic reflex or Doll's eye phenomenon. Rule out cervical spine injury and turn the head from side to side and look for the eyeball movements. Normally the eyes move opposite to the head movement. This is called Doll's eye phenomenon. It tests cranial nerve 8, which is afferent, 3 and 4, which are efferent. Oculocardiac reflex. Gentle pressure on the eye globe normally causes slowing of the heart rate, and this response is absent in brain dead individuals. Corneal reflex. Touch the sclerocorneal junction with cotton tip. Look for the blink, reddening or watering of the eyes. So this is absent in brainstem dead patients. It tests cranial nerve 5 and 7. Gag reflex. Stimulate the back of the pharynx with a tongue depressor and look for gagging. It tests cranial nerve 9 and 10. Cough reflex. Pass the suction catheter into the trachea through the endotracheal tube or the tracheostomy tube. Look for the cough response and it tests cranial nerve 10. The atropine challenge. Give 1 to 2 milligrams of atropine. Normally it increases the heart rate, but here there will be no change in the heart rate. And also look for the response to painful stimulation by applying noxious stimulus at various points like supraorbital ridge, upper limb nail beds, toe nail beds, and sternum and shin. So very frequently in a brain dead individuals, we come across spontaneous somatic movements in the form of dorsiflexion of the ankle, triple flexion of the ankle, knee and hip joints, and movement of the shoulder that mimics respiratory movement. And sometimes suddenly the upper body may sit up, the patient may appear to sit up on the body, that is called Lazarus, and these movements are mediated by spinal cord reflexes. The importance is that it does not preclude the diagnosis of brain death, but definitely it creates a confusion in diagnosis of brain death and also makes it difficult to explain the concept of brain death to the relatives. Coming to the apnea test, which is the backbone of diagnosis of brain death, it is based on the principle that the respiratory center is located in the brainstem and it is sensitive to stimulation by carbon dioxide. And we disconnect the ventilator for some time and allow the carbon dioxide to build up and see whether the carbon dioxide is able to stimulate the respiratory center or not. So how to perform the test? First we have to ensure normothermia, normotension and normal electrolyte and acid base status. Pre-oxygenate the patient with 100% oxygen for 10 to 15 minutes in order to achieve PaO2 minimum 200 millimeters of mercury, so that the patient tolerates the ventilator disconnection for at least 10 minutes. Set the respiratory rate to 10 to 12 per minute to achieve a baseline PaCO2 of 40 millimeters of mercury. Draw a pre-test arterial sample of blood for baseline PaCO2. Disconnect the ventilator, insert the oxygen catheter up to the carina and deliver oxygen 8 to 10 liters per minute, and look for 8 to 10 minutes and look for the breathing movements. And then draw a post-test sample of arterial blood for PaCO2. Then connect the ventilator. The inference, if the PaCO2 is more than 60 millimeters of mercury or 20 millimeters of mercury more than the baseline, especially in CO2 retainers like COPD patients, the test is said to be positive. And we need to repeat the test after 6 hours in adults, after 12 hours in children less than 5 years, and after 24 hours in infants and neonates. Here the time of second apnea test is taken as the time of death compared to clinical death where the time of stoppage of heart is taken as time of death. And the apnea test should be the last one to be done, because if the patient is not brain dead, the ventilator disconnection can itself cause hypoxic damage to the brainstem. So some of the complications that can occur during apnea test are desaturation, arrhythmias, hypotension and cardiac arrest. In that case, we need to abandon the test and go for alternative tests or ancillary tests or confirmatory tests. So whenever the apnea test is indeterminate, patient cannot tolerate the apnea test, or the waiting period for the apnea test is unacceptable, or the spontaneous movements are excessively disturbing, then we can go for ancillary tests. So some of the ancillary tests of cerebral hemispheric functions are EEG, electroencephalogram. It demonstrates the absence of electrical activity or it shows a flat EEG. The advantages are it is non-invasive and done on bedside, but it is technically very cumbersome, so it is less frequently used. Transcranial Doppler, it shows various patterns of blood flow like progressive decrease in diastolic flow speed, separation of diastolic and systolic waveforms, inversion of diastolic wave or even disappearance of diastolic wave. The advantages are that it is non-invasive, accurate and can be done on bedside, but the disadvantages are that it is subjective, interpreter dependent and it does not quantify the cerebral blood flow. False negatives can occur if the acoustic window is not found due to thickness of the scalp. That may lead to loss of a donor. Cerebral angiography, either conventional CT angiography or MR angiography. It is a gold standard test to which all other tests are compared because no false positives have been reported. Here a dye is injected into the aortic arch and look for the cerebral circulation. As we can see in the second picture, there is no flow beyond the circle of Willis. That is called cerebral circulatory arrest. The disadvantages of this are here we need to shift the patient from the ICU to the radiology suite. So there is associated instability. So shifting a brain dead patient is not easy. Patient is relatively unstable on various vasopressors and inotropes and ventilator. So there can be disconnection of ventilator and the support drugs that leads to hypoxia, hypotension, arrhythmias and even cardiac arrest. So contrast-induced complications, especially if the patient is a potential kidney donor, the kidney function may be compromised in a recipient. So and it is expensive and invasive. Coming to isotope perfusion studies or cerebral scintigraphy, here gamma emitting technetium-99 tracer is injected into the venous system and serial images are obtained in anterior and lateral planes at 30 minutes, 60 minutes and 2 hours. Here the skull shows no tracer activity in the cranium, that is called hollow skull phenomenon. Here also we need to shift the patient from ICU to the radiology suite, which is associated with instability, and again it is expensive and invasive. To sum up, the diagnosis of brain death is purely by clinical examination. We need to establish an identifiable cause and presence of coma and absence of brainstem reflexes with permanent loss of ability to breathe spontaneously. In case any doubt, we can go for ancillary tests like EEG, transcranial Doppler, CT angiogram, CT MR angiogram or cerebral scintigraphy. Coming to certification of brain death, the brain death has to be certified by a panel of 4 experts, and one of them must be a neurologist or a neurosurgeon, and the others are administrator in charge of the hospital like superintendent, a treating doctor and intensivist, an anesthesiologist or a physician in the list of doctors given by appropriate authority of the government. The list is again sent by the institute. So it should be done in a hospital with intensive care unit and neurosurgery department. The hospital should be licensed by the authorization committee to perform organ retrieval. The certification is done in Form 10, which includes complete patient details like his personal lifestyle and behavioral details and his investigations, any contraindications like HIV positive or negative, all those details, the causes of brain death, whether it is RTA or intracranial hemorrhage, and the reversible causes of coma, that there is no hypothermia, there is no hyponatremia, hypoglycemia, so all those things should be ruled out. The first and second apnea, all the tests of brain function, including the first and second apnea test, the time of death, signature by all 4 experts 2 times at an interval of 6 hours. Coming to legal issues, the kidney transplants in India started in the year 1970s, and since that time India has been the leading country in renal transplantation in Asian subcontinent. The history of transplants in the last 4 decades has seen various changes. The first 10 years were spent in mastering the surgical skills and immune suppression. The success of this led to phenomenal rise in the number of transplants in the next 10 years, followed by kidney donations which took place from economically weaker sections with organ commerce mainly for monetary benefit, leading to exploitation of donors. So in the 4th decade, a lot of critics and protests took place in India that forced the government to form an act called Transplantation of Human Organs and Tissues Act in 1994 and rules in 1995. So Transplantation of Human Organs and Tissues Act 1994 broadly provides for regulation of removal, storage and transplantation of human organs for therapeutic purposes only, and it prevents any commercial dealings in organ transplantation and makes it a punishable offence. It also provides for some of the definitions like what is human organ, what should be the relation between the donor and the recipient, who is the appropriate authority and authorization committee, who forms those committees and what are their roles and responsibilities, and approval or cancellation of license for a retrieval or transplantation center or both. So it also provides a guidelines for who, where and how one should declare a death. So conclusions. Organ transplantation is the rapidly advancing subject in the field of medicine and is the single best option for patients with end-stage organ diseases. Deceased organ donation facilitates not only kidney and liver donations but also the heart, lung, pancreas, intestine, skin, eyes, so many organs which are not possible in live donations. In India, the transplantation incidence is only 0.8 per million population compared to Western countries which approaches almost 50%. So we have to go a long way in achieving decent statistics. Around 90,000 fatal road accidents occur in India with head injuries every year, leaving major portion of donors from India by road traffic accidents alone. Even if 5 to 10% of these patients became organ donors, there would be no requirement for a living person to donate an organ. So there is universal shortage of organs with huge imbalance in supply and demand, and this shortage is not because of shortage of organs but because of lack of awareness among public and even the medical professionals, and also lack of strong legal framework. And there is need to create awareness among public using multimedia, medical and allied professionals by regular workshops, CMEs and conferences. The government of Karnataka is promoting organ transplantation by issuing license to most of the government medical colleges as retrieval centers at least, and every hospital caring for neurocritical patients should have its own protocol and team of doctors to facilitate deceased organ donation. The end of life for one soul may be the beginning of life for another soul. Thank you audience for being very patient in the last topic and listening to it.